I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mack for some opening comments. And then after that, if you'd like to ask questions, please just send me a text and I'll add you to the list.
Thank you, David. And I apologize, there's something in the middle of the screen here that I need to, there we go. So thank you, David, and good morning to everybody. Hope all of you and your families are healthy and safe, and appreciate you joining us today on the Juneteenth holiday. And we certainly look forward to the parade tomorrow. And many of us in the athletic department look forward to participating. Again, look forward to this time together here, and we'll open it up to questions.
All right, our first question comes from John Warner from the Waco Tribune-Herald.
Okay.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
We can, John.
Okay,
Morning.
great. Mack, have you finished onboarding the football players, and are there any more positive tests?
John, thank you for the question. And so I would tell you, as of today, we've completed 101 tests. You obviously on Tuesday, everyone received the results for 53 of those. So a majority, I would say approximately 95% of our football team has been onboarded. The 53 tests that we've completed this week, we'll let everyone know those results. We don't have all of those in yet, but we'll let everybody know about those results on Monday. And then our infectious disease response team will meet on Tuesday, the 23rd, to evaluate how the complete onboarding process has gone for those student athletes, and then make a decision on the next group of student athletes, which tentatively we could begin onboarding our fall sports, starting with soccer and volleyball, as soon as July 6th. But again, tentative as of now, and until the infectious response team sits and meets on Tuesday. And with us on the call today is Kenny Boyd, our Senior Associate AD for Health and Wellness. And I'm going to ask Kenny here just to participate and give you a little bit background on our infectious response team. Kenny?
Thank you, Mack. Certainly one of the cornerstones of any return to campus framework that you see is going to be a response plan. And our response plan is one that we certainly recognize that not only is this a concern within athletics and getting back to the field and the court, but it's a concern that involves campus as well as the community. And so our infection response team has two main components, and it's a medical response plan, and then the other part of it is our communications plan. You've seen some of that this week as we've provided some ways in which we're going to communicate externally, but there's also an internal communications plan that happens within the athletics department and with campus emergency management services and their group, as well as our campus health services with Dr. Stern as the medical director. Also included in this group is within the medical response plan is members of Waco Public Health Authority, and being able to speak into not only some of our processes that they can be able to assess, but also to provide us input and questions that they might have or concerns based off of things that come up from cases that will be presented as we go through this process. So it's a multidisciplinary group. Team physicians from Baylor, Scott & White are a part of this as well. And we are meeting weekly at this point. As we go through our onboarding process with baseline testing, and then ultimately down the road with surveillance testing, it's going to be a process where we're going to meet weekly just to assess each phase and each case that comes up to ensure that we are moving in the right direction and everybody's on the same page.
Thank you, Kenny. And again, I think all of you, if you've heard me on the radio or read anything in terms of articles where I've been quoted, I've mentioned Kenny's name quite a bit, and just grateful to Kenny and to our health and wellness team and to all of our team physicians. They have done a great job. And again, we'll wait to see on the 23rd how that group feels about the next phase, moving to the next phase. As mentioned, soccer, volleyball, potentially on July 6th, followed by cross-country men's basketball, and then followed by women's basketball probably a week later, their choice.
All right, our next question comes from Stephen Hawkins from the Associated Press.
You know, Mac, a minute ago when you said you had something in the middle of your screen, I thought you might have been talking about this little facial thing you got going. So, hey,
that's what happens when you don't have to meet in person with everybody on a daily basis.
There you go. I got two things I want to ask you about. First, there's been a lot about some schools having athletes sign waivers, releases before participating based on COVID-19. Are you guys requiring or doing anything like that with your athletes?
Yeah, we are asking them to sign a waiver, an awareness form, and prior to onboarding the current student athletes that we're in the process of finishing, we went out to them with a questionnaire, making sure that we had an understanding of their comfort level. We've been very, very clear with everyone involved that we will not, force any one student athlete or student athletes to return. If they have a discomfort about returning, then we will work with them individually in terms of that plan and when is the time and how we do that. So long answer, Stephen, but yes, we're asking them to sign a form. And Kenny, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the big component of it is just the acknowledgement of and understanding of COVID-19, the fact that we are meeting with them. Again, I spoke about the response plan as being a cornerstone. Well, another cornerstone in this framework is our education plan. And that's already started with even the programs that haven't onboarded, having virtual meetings with the team to educate them on COVID-19, what the signs and symptoms are, what our process is and how our response will be for them, and then start giving them an idea about what to expect when they come on campus for their activities. So there's an acknowledgement that our athletes will have, as well as our coaches and our staff, about not only the education around COVID-19 that's being provided for them, but also the concerns of, if they're sick, not to come in, to call and get in touch with our team physicians. And so different strategies like that. So that's a part of this as well.
Thank you, Kenny. And again, we've talked about it, this idea, this campaign of reunited and protect yourself and care for others. And so, as Kenny mentioned, the educational component is really an important piece of this. And it extends beyond just our student athletes and staff. We've done educational sessions with the parents of our student athletes. And we'll continue to do that, and certainly think that is a very valuable component as well.
Our next question comes from Matt Roberts from KWKT TV in Waco.
Hey, Mac, thanks so much for doing this. It's been a bit since we've talked to you, but can you just take us through, from March when all this broke down, just to kind of your involvement? Obviously, you've been involved at the Big 12 level with things, but just your involvement from when this started to where we are today.
Thank you, Matt, for the question. And quite frankly, it's been a lot. And as you were asking that question, I'm thinking about, where do I start? Where do I begin? And I think that the first piece was just trying to understand the reality of what we might be dealing with. And early on, we weren't, obviously quite certain. We knew that, COVID-19 was serious. Obviously, the cancellation of the Big 12 basketball tournaments and then the NCAA tournament. But we quickly began to shift and think about how, it was going to impact Baylor specifically. It's been talked about, from a financial standpoint, really needed to attack that first and to have a great understanding, the financial impact on campus, throughout campus, and then obviously specifically for Baylor athletics. Kenny Boyd, Cody Hall, who is our Senior Associate Athletic Director for Financial Services, did an unbelievable job, him and his team, and really we went through a forecasting process, 4 different cost reduction models, right? Chose one, identified cost reduction levers, throughout the department, settled on a plan, focused, and then began to execute. And then, the whole idea of this return to campus, that has been somewhat overwhelming. It has required a lot of time, a lot of people to be involved, a collaborative effort. And when you think about the return to campus, we're so focused on our student athletes, but it's also our staff. And I'm certainly worried about our student athletes and them being infected with COVID-19, but I'm equally worried about our staff members as well. And then the other piece has been, the Big 12, the conference. And, when we went into this, started this back in mid-March, I just happened to be chair of the Big 12 ADs. And so that's required a lot of time. And, we, as I've mentioned, the Big 12 ADs have met, at minimum once a week, many weeks, more than once a week, and trying to, again, coalesce around, all of the return dates. What does that look like? What's the standard for when we return throughout the conference? What's the national landscape? And so those are all the things that we've been juggling, and then plus a lot of normal operating procedure things that we need to continue on with. It was interesting, and I've said this before. We right at the beginning of this, I think I came up with a list of 10 things that we can get done, right? That strategic initiatives that we can get done during this time frame, and I think we've been able to address 1 or 2. So that gives you the sense of the magnitude of what we've been dealing with, and just all the detail that goes with it.
Next question.
Thanks, Mac. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Our next question is from Curtis Quillen from KCEN TV in Waco.
Good morning, Mac. Hey, I know you guys have said that you're taking a kind of a multifaceted approach to try and keep players and coaching staff safe from this virus as you start onboarding again. But what does that plan consist of? What are the details to try to keep everybody as safe as possible from this virus?
Well, I will certainly begin to talk about it, and then ask Kenny to provide any additional details. But it's really trying to educate, right, how the disease spreads, right, and trying to take precautionary measures. Again, when we started the the Reunited campaign and protect yourself, care for others, making sure that, everybody understands that we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, whether it's face guarding, social distancing, washing hands. Kenny talked about, self-monitoring. You wake up in the morning, if you don't feel good, don't come to the voluntary workout, or don't come into the office, right? And so this whole idea in terms of education, and then understanding that we have a responsibility to the Waco community, and the reality of how this works, right? If you have one positive, that student athlete or that staff goes into isolation for 10 days, right? And then then the job of identifying primary contacts, and then those primary contacts have to be self-quarantined for 14 days, and then secondary contacts, self-monitoring. And so just making sure that people understand all of that, right? And if we're not paying attention to details, if we're not diligently taking care of ourselves and protecting others, we're gonna have issues. We're gonna have problems. And I think to date we've been blessed because we haven't had the first 53. We didn't have a lot of positives, but we're early in the process. We still have 101 we've completed in terms of tests. We still have 400 more student athletes to go. So, Kenny, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think it's important to note whenever we're looking at this plan that testing is only a small part of how we can mitigate the risk, and just knowing that we're not going to truly be able to 100% prevent this from affecting our athletics department. And I think we're seeing that play out across the country and some of the things that we've seen already. The part of this that I think really gets to be specific is how we are working together internally with Henry Howard, Drew Pittman, with our facilities management, and then what we do with our medical response program with Dr. Laura Irvin with Southwest Sports Medicine, and Dr. Sharon Stern with Campus Health, and how we approach our response. But there is a testing process that we have, but then there's also a process that we want to make sure that our players are coming through the facility in a single point of entry. They are going through a screening process. We are getting them into their weight training and conditioning, utilizing outdoors as much as possible, but also understanding that we need to provide some margin of time between groups so that we're getting our cleaning done. So there's other things within the component of our plan that have to be continued to be evaluated and reassessed. How we're getting our cleaning services managed through this process between each group, how we're doing that onboarding with our other teams. Some of this information is going to change as we've talked to each one of our groups and coaches. You kind of start off with the disclaimer that the information I'm sharing with you right now is likely going to change next week. And that's played out pretty much through this entire process. There's been some nuance or some change. So those are some additional details to provide in what we're doing with our program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't, mention our facility staff, because they do have a huge role in this, and also our third party partners in terms of keeping our facilities at a pristine level in terms of cleanliness and making sure we do everything we can to prevent the spread of infectious disease.
Thank you.
Our next question's from Cedric Golden from the Austin American-Statesman.
Hey, good morning, Mac.
Good morning, Cedric.
Hey, I know schools like Baylor send a lot of kids to the pros in different sports. And have you and the Big 12 ADs, have you discussed the possibility, and not to make this get too macabre on this, but of players insuring themselves against catastrophic loss to this virus? Because in the past, like potential first round pick could get an insurance policy to protect against a blown out knee, or et cetera. Have you guys discussed that? And if not, what's the viability of insuring oneself against this disease catastrophically?
So Cedric, I mean, really interesting question. And you know, the first part of your question is no. We really haven't had any type of discussion along those lines. Not at the conference level. I certainly am not aware of any conversations at the national level. We have not talked about it. But I think you bring up a really interesting point, and something, you know, for us to look at. And so now you've given me another thing to do to add to the to-do list. But that is a really interesting thought, Cedric. And so thank you. And you know, we'll look into that, and we'll explore the viability of that.
And one more, David, if you don't mind. Mack, are you surprised by the number of positives we've seen on the national level? And does that give you a little bit of pause that football's actually going to happen on time this fall?
I don't know that I'm surprised. You know, I was in another city over the weekend for my daughter's wedding, and that city, it was still somewhat closed, and we happened to be downtown, and you know, every restaurant, every bar was packed, nobody with masks, right? And when you have a large group of people that don't even know they have it, that are asymptomatic, right? Just the spread. And so I'm not surprised. I'm worried. I'm worried when we get into a football season, and you know, at least as of today, and Kenny mentioned it, you know, it could certainly change by the time we get to the 1st of September. But this idea of surveillance testing and a standard, and, you know, having to test our student athletes, those that are in competition in season, you know, once a week, right? And then what happens if you have a positive, and then, you know, the number of primary contacts, and, you know, if at that point in time still, you know, working with public health officials, the CDC, the self-quarantine of 14 days for all of those primary contacts, right? And you know, all of a sudden you could be missing a large group of student athletes. And there's a school that had one positive that led to 20 plus primary contacts that are now in self-quarantine for 14 days. And so that's the magnitude of what we're dealing with. And so, you know, as Kenny talked about some of the details of how we're trying to prevent the spread right here on campus, it's gonna, you know, we better do that and execute that at a really, really high level.
Next question is from Chuck Carlton from the Dallas Morning News.
Hi, Mack. Appreciate you doing this. Kind of following up on the same topic that Cedric just broached, but just for example, you had another Big 12 school just within the last 24 hours report 13 positive tests among football players, 10 more in that sort of quarantine situation because of contact tracing. Putting on both your Baylor hat and your Big 12 hat, if we have something like that happen in a game week during the course of the season, like you talked about, do we even play that game, or what's the situation like? Because it seems like we're in uncharted territory on that.
Yeah, Chuck, and good morning, and thank you for being on the call. You're right. We are in uncharted territory. I think, the message that we've been trying to, provide for our staff at least is this upcoming year is not going to be normal, right? So get that out of your mind, right? The way things have happened in the past will not be the way things happen this upcoming year. And Chuck, it wouldn't surprise me if we had to cancel a game, whether that's, a football game, a volleyball match, a soccer match, right? A basketball game. I think all of those things are on the table, right? And then if you have cancellations, right, are there any contingency plans for making those games up? Depending upon the sport, there may be an opportunity to do so. There may not be an opportunity to do so. And so, again, I think this upcoming year could look, and I certainly think it will look very, very different. And we're going to be faced with the reality that we may not be able to play a game. We have a bunch of student athletes that test positive, that Wednesday before we're getting ready to get on a plane to play, Oklahoma. I don't know that we're playing that game.
Next question is from Kevin Longquist from SicEmSports.com. Kevin, you'll have to unmute your mic, please.
Okay. Matt, can you hear me okay?
Kevin, I can, and don't worry about that. I do that all the time.
Okay. I wanted to get your reaction to the NCAA Division I Council about the 6-week practice plan that's supposed to be implemented by late July, and what your reaction was, especially kind of piggybacking on what the other questions have been, but at least from just going into contact because of how easily, presumably, this virus could spread and how you all are trying to address that.
Yeah, great question. I think nationally, the American Football Coaches Association, the commissioners within the FBS, certainly at the A5 level, the athletic directors, I think we all coalesced around this 6-week period of time and really thinking about health and safety. And, as everyone knows, the D1 Council voted so that, for people that begin, on September 5, their first game, that they can start summer access required activity on July 13th. For us, that will be July 14th, since our game was moved to that Sunday. Again, I think one of the thought processes was, once we have our student athletes here, right, probably not a good idea to have them go back home. And so trying to figure out a way that once they're here to keep them here and to assure that we can, again, do everything we can in terms of best practices. Kevin, you talked about and you mentioned football practice, and our medical directors have categorized football as a high risk in terms of the spread because of the contact, because of the close proximity when you're practicing. And so right now, as I mentioned, it will not be like it normally was. Practice, I think, will look. There'll certainly be some components that are the same, but I think practice is going to look a lot different. I don't think you're going to see large huddles of student athletes gathering up at the end of practice or in the middle of practice, right? I think we'll be very strategic in terms of the social distancing and how you do that throughout practice. We could see, student athletes and staff members with face masks or face guards, right? So those are all of the things that we're currently working through in terms of how we change practice and what are those best practices.
Thanks, Mac.
Next question is from David Smoke from Sigum 365.
Hey, Mac, good morning. There have been some campuses or student athletes around college sports that have been very outspoken about various traditions and or things on the campus that have been racially tagged. You had a very emotional Zoom meeting with some of your student athletes about 3 weeks ago, and you mentioned that to us. Do you feel like that you were able to get out in front of that and try to find out what might be concerns from student athletes about anything involving Baylor?
Thank you, Smoke, for the question. And, I don't know if we got out in front of anything, right? I think, we just wanted to listen and to understand. And, when I was at Houston, our men's basketball coach, James Dickey, the former head coach at Texas Tech and just a wonderful individual, we had just moved and one of my daughters was struggling with the transition and it was bothering me. And he made a statement to me that I'll never forget. He said, Mac, as a parent, you'll only be as happy as your most unhappy child. And that resonates for me today because I think about, Baylor athletics. I truly believe we're a family, right? And we have student athletes that are hurting. We have staff members that are hurting, right? And I think, all of us certainly care and are concerned and have great empathy for all those that are hurting. And so, again, just trying to listen and to understand. And, I'll say this. This was important, that this whole idea of inclusion, diversity, racism, this was important to Baylor athletics before the George Floyd incident. And the steps and the things that we've done, whether it's been hiring practices, right? Whether it's been the variety of workshops, whether it's been the formation of a cultural humility group. And so it's been important, before, right? It's important today and it will be important tomorrow. And Baylor athletics, we have a long way to go and grow in this area.
Our next question comes from Jack Allen from KXXV TV in Waco.
Mac, thanks so much for taking a little bit of time this morning. Going back to COVID and all of that, as you look at other schools across the Lone Star State who have maybe had to temporarily cancel summer workouts, kind of take a step back, for you guys, is there a certain number or anything where y'all will say we need to stop, we need to kind of reset, or is it more about trends and things like that?
It's a great question, and I'm going to ask Kenny to answer anything specifically, but it's one of the primary reasons why we have an infectious response team with people made up of that expertise that are a lot smarter than me that can help guide us and make that decision for us. And that's why after every phase, we're taking the time, that group is taking the time to evaluate that onboarding process and what can be changed, what can be tweaked, right? And then are we ready to move on to the next phase? And so, Kenny, if you will, any additional specifics?
Thanks, Mac. Jack, to answer your question, there's not a magical number. I think a lot of this is going to be dependent on each individual institution's ability to respond to what's presented. And that's why we do have our response team in place to help evaluate that. For example, just because we're meeting on Tuesday doesn't mean we won't meet on a Sunday when we get test results back. That could be a concern. And so one of the really, I think, good things in this collaboration is understanding that, this group is on call during this time to help provide guidance for Mack and our leadership on campus as we move forward. One of the things that we've done internally through our athletic medicine team is understand that, public health is going to need some support through this. And one of the ways that we can support them is our staff has gone through the contact tracing course to better understand what are the needs when we're looking at primary contacts, assessing those, getting that information out. How do we communicate to the student athletes and the parents about this? And so, our staff has been trained to be able to do this and assist public health in this way. And so the more information that we can get in a timely fashion, we feel the better we are going to be in as far as being capable to respond. But there may be a situation where we do have to hit pause and we do have to take a step back and ensure that those that are dealing with the illness are being taken care of immediately, and that we're not doing anything that would put anybody else in harm's way. So that's some of the other specifics in our plan.
Thank you, Kenny. I think our analogy is, COVID-19 is an unbelievably formidable opponent. And if you have a chance to overcome that opponent, you better, take the time, great preparation, have a great plan, be able to change, maybe tweak that plan on the fly and execute at a high level. This is like football playing against Clemson or Oklahoma, or men's basketball against KU, or women's basketball against UConn. You have to take the time and make sure that you have a really well thought out plan, and then do the very, very best that you can to execute it at a high level. And again, this is, as Kenny said, this is something that is changing each and every day. And we're going to be cautious. If we're going to err, we're going to err on the side of caution.
Next question is from Curtis Quillen from KCEN TV.
Hey, Mac, I know we've still got a while to go. Have you heard a timeline on when any decisions might be made on what football season would look like if we do have it? Do you have any thoughts of your own as to whether or not we're going to have it, or what it might look like?
Yeah, again, I think right now I'm certainly in the camp of being cautiously optimistic. I do think we'll play football. I think today the intent is to play a 12-game schedule. And the question as to, when we might have more clarity, I think, for at least me, for us, that first date is, July 15th. Let's see where we're at and what it looks like, right? Are we able to practice? Are we able to do all of the things to make sure that our student athletes are ready to play? And again, not just football, but also soccer and volleyball and cross country, right? From a health and wellness, right? Physically, they're in shape, condition wise, again, that they're ready. So I do think, again, that we will have a football season. There may be some cancellations, there may be some interruptions, but I think right now the intent and the thought is that we'll start on time. But we can have this conversation again on July 15th and see where we are and what it looks like.
Next question is from Matt Roberts, KWKT TV in Waco.
Hey, Mac. Yeah, obviously, Dave Aranda taking over in kind of a weird time as the head coach at Baylor. What have your conversations been like with him throughout this time, and what have you really seen from him leading that program, albeit from a distance?
Yeah, great question, and what a time to begin your first head coaching job, right? And I'm really, I guess proud would be the right word of him and the way he's handled it. I will tell you that our conversations have been 2% football and 98% everything else. And it's really been about, connecting with our student athletes. How do we do that in a meaningful way over Zoom, virtually? As you know, right, didn't have a lot of time, in-person time with our student athletes, Coach Aranda or the staff, right, and trying to develop those relationships, those genuine, trusting relationships, and even the staff knew to each other. So that's been most of our conversation about just how do you build that? How do you build those relationships and those trusts and that trust while you're not in person? Certainly the recruiting piece. How do you continue to do that? And I would just say that Coach Aranda gets it, right? He understands that the X's and O's and all of that's not going to matter if we haven't taken the time to develop those relationships and build those relationships. So that's really been most of it. And I'll tell you, I really do. I think he's done a tremendous job. I think his staff has done a tremendous job of coming together and finding a way to build unity.
Thanks,
All right,
Mac.
those are all the questions we have. We'll get you guys all video of this entire meeting shortly. Really appreciate your patience in making this happen. Thank you, Mac.
Thank you, David, and thank you to all of you. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the call, to participate, and again, you and your families continue to stay safe and healthy, and we'll look forward to talking again soon. Thank you.